Did you say backwards or forward? 4,
Both.
5. All right, we got to get masked up for this one, everybody. So as you're coming in, make sure you put your mask on. I won't let you in without it. I was in I was in Georgia and south of North Carolina this week, and the mask rules there were pretty heavy. Everybody had them on. Everybody was wearing them. They wouldn't let you in the store. You could take it off when you got to your seat, but other than that, it was pretty spot on. They did a good job with it. All right, welcome everyone. Come in, grab a seat. Say hi to your neighbor. Put something in chat. Tell us where you're here from so we can see you and you can practice chat just a little bit. I'm going to introduce our players of our game of life here in just a second. There's a Buffalo. JP's on here from Buffalo. I'm assuming that's New York. And we'll do a little bit of Q&A as well. Kansas City, good assumption, JP says. All right, so as people continue to come in, Virginia, Miranda, are you at the farm or are you at the house? You can tell me in chat. Let me give you just a little bit of insight about what we're doing today. It's pretty cool to have these folks back with us. It was about 150 days ago. That's the crazy part. So it was about 150 days ago when, you know, everything kind of went a little nutty, and I reached out to Leah. Tim, you weren't here last time, but Leah was with me, Martha was here, and Teresa was here, and we had a couple of other people, and we just said, let's bring some really smart people together to help kind of tell us what's really going on in the world and answer any questions that anybody has about what's happening. And we had a lot of people show up, ask a lot of questions, and we felt like, hey, it's been 150 days. Maybe we bring these folks back and do some Q&A with them, you know, just to get us caught up on where we are and what's going on. So today we have some quick introductions. Teresa Bailey, no relation, but cool last name. Raise your hand so everybody knows who you are, Teresa. So Teresa is a wealth strategist with Waddell & Associates. She orchestrates the financial affairs of executives, entrepreneurs, and other driven individuals. She also builds the W&A brand through coordinating brand development, client events, and educational content development. She's a certified financial planner and divorce financial analyst. Hopefully that never comes up in my household, so stay away from that one with us. And she's got a bunch of other like series things that she's done. So super
not important.
Smart. Yeah, and then 40 under 40, which was amazing too.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And then Tim Ellis is coming to us from Memphis, Tennessee. Tim is responsible for managing relationships with clients and providing financial planning services covering the areas of retirement, income tax, estate, gift, risk management, and education at Waddell & Associates. So we've got a couple of brains from the economy side of this conversation. In addition to client responsibilities, Tim serves on the firm's investment committee. So you're the guy that decides where money goes. Is that you?
Somewhat.
Oh, and I thought that was somebody else. Now I know who really the brain is. CPA, State of Tennessee, and personal financial specialist accreditations as well. So again, lots of brains in the room. They always say, if you put yourself in places where people are smarter than you are. We have certainly done that with this group today. And then Leah, raise your hand so we can see you. All right, and you almost gave it away because you do have the white jacket on. So Dr. Leah Cordovez is a double board certified in integrative. How do you say that? Integrative in internal medicine, and is recognized as a prestigious fellow of the American College of Physicians. He serves as an assistant professor for medicine at the University of Tennessee. I was just there this weekend. I took my daughter by Neyland Stadium and we drove around the campus. Nobody was there. So I wanted her to see it. And she holds a master's degree in healthcare management from Vanderbilt Owens School of Business. She also is the one that keeps me healthy. So when I have any challenges or just thoughts about something, I always can call you, and I appreciate you responding. So thank you for being here. And then last but not least, We get to the legal side of our world with this Martha Boyd. So wave for us so we can see her. Martha is a shareholder in the Labor and Employment Group at Baker Donaldson. Martha Boyd advises nonprofits, for-profits, and public companies on all types of employment issues. Her role includes, but not limited to, creating legalese-free employment handbooks, I love that, and employment policies that employees can actually understand and follow, advising businesses on their obligations regarding employee leaves of absences, counseling clients on responding to harassment claims and investigating those claims when an outside investigator is desirable, and helping business leaders understand employee and independent contractor worker classifications, among other things that are legal. So again, thank you all for being here. We wanted to kind of get this group together to cover kind of this medical, economy, legal side of what's going on in our world today, because things are shifting and changing. And I wanted to just give you the floor to start with. And since this started as a virus and a pandemic, I thought we might start in the medical space. So it's a little bit of, health related. And if you would just take like 3-5 minutes, give us your thoughts on where are we now, what's going on. That'll get us kind of started in this conversation.
Where we are now is an amalgam of everybody's thoughts. Every day it's totally different. And in order to keep up, every day it's something new. So it's a brand new virus that nobody had before. And what's so important about it, the reason, and pardon me for speaking to you guys like kindergartners, it's not that it's so deadly, right? It's serious and it can cause terrible complications. 80% of the people that get it will have mild or no symptoms, should recover pretty easily as a cold, and 20% get pretty sick. Of those 20%, 2% won't make it. The reason why this is so important is because we can't all be sick at once, because then that 2% becomes a number that's unmanageable. So we'll start there. So because it was so new and it's a single-stranded RNA virus, which is a lot different than the things that we have vaccines for, it can quickly mutate to evade treatment. So over the past 150 days, what we've been trying to figure out is what to treat it, to prevent it, and in the long term, how are we going to deal with this? So this is where we are, a brand new virus, people are getting sick. There's no indication that we could develop long-term immunity to it, so that's the scariest thing. For me, and I'm probably giving away the ending, the most important thing that we can do is be prepared for it. So of all the studies that we've read, hydroxychloroquine, yes, then no. Remdesivir, yes, and then there's another one, the vaccine. Of all the things that we know that a well-prepared immune system can handle this much easier than not. So we can talk about that now, Andy, or we can talk about that later, but things like sleep, nutrition, and immune status are coming down as we filter through and coming out as the most important things to focus on.
I do have a question.
Basically, sure.
We'll come back to that. I do have a question. And you have like this dramatic pause going on about every 17th word. It's very dramatic and it captures everybody's attention. So I don't know if you're doing that on purpose or not, but it's awesome.
I don't mean to. It's just so, it is literally a different topic every day. So I'm telling you what I know today, and if this recording lives on for 2 months and what I'm saying is completely obsolete.
It's going to live on.
Yeah, maybe my pauses will.
All right, I think it's your Wi-Fi connection in this case, but it works for you. So let's go from health and medical, and we're going to come back to, we all got questions. You're going to have questions coming in. Let's go from there to the economy, because that was kind of the first thing that happened. Virus showed up, people started getting a little bit ill, this was going on, borders started shutting, the economy began to shift into this space, and then we're going to end up with kind of employment law, because that's, the economy is driven by a bunch of people that have to go to work every day, and what are the implications of that? So Tim, I think you're going to take this first section.
Yeah, so 150 days ago, really started getting into the depths of this thing. Really kind of bottomed there in March and April, really, with both job losses, market losses, total revenue losses. And since then, it's looked a lot closer to that V-shaped recovery than maybe the U or the L or any other letters that were kind of kicked out there. And we actually, I'll tackle it from a market perspective first, because we find ourselves talking about this more and more recently. There's been this big divergence between both the stock market and the bond market and what's going on with the economy. And in reality, it's a little bit more rational than you would think. It's really driven by three different factors here. One, if you look at the stock market, more and more today, it's driven by just a few number of stocks, and really 5 stocks. You take most people are familiar with FANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. You can really swap out the end, the Netflix, put in Microsoft, and that's 23% of the market now if you look at S&P 500. Those all benefited very much from people sitting at home. And so what you've seen is technology, healthcare, consumer staples, and you can toss in some of the smaller like utilities, held up very well throughout this. What got crushed is exactly what you would think got crushed. Energy, nobody drove anywhere for a couple of months. And for a while, West Texas crude went negative because they ran out of storage. So if we look at it year to date, energy's down 35%. Financials are down 17%. Interest rates are through the floor. We're back to zero interest rate policy. Everybody's refinancing their mortgage. Industrials are down 4%, whereas technology is up 25%. And so that's how we get back to a market that's right at all-time highs. It's acting a little bit more rationally than you would think. We're just here in the U.S. more tilted towards technology than we've probably ever been. The second is stimulus, which David Waddell, he was on this town hall 150 days ago. He kind of went ahead and mentioned it. But we got this CARES Act, which was $2 trillion of fiscal direct aid, and that's the $1,200 checks, the payroll protection program loans that went to small businesses, the expanded unemployment benefits. Those are $600 a week federal added to your state benefits. All of that was big direct aid that actually resulted in personal income and personal savings rate going up. Believe it or not, like credit card and personal debt went down last quarter because people just funneled some of that money into their credit cards and their personal debt. So we've had a massive amount of stimulus on the fiscal side and the monetary side. The Federal Reserve, on March 23rd, they had already dropped interest rates to 0, which kind of creates they call it TINA, there is no alternative, where if you can't get yield on cash, if you can't get yield on bonds, you probably don't want to venture into real estate if everybody shrinks their footprint in office, if everybody turns over in retail with restaurants and some of these apparels that are really struggling. So if you don't like real estate, don't like cash, don't like bonds, what do you go into? You go into stocks. So that kind of funnels everything into the stock market as well. And then on March 23rd, which coincides with the market bottom, that was down 35% in most global stock market indexes. That's when they came out and said that they were going to be restarting their bond buying program called quantitative easing, and they wouldn't have an end date on it, and they didn't necessarily even put a size to it. They're calling it QE forever at this point. That was the date of the market bottom, and we've rallied to right here at all-time highs. And so we've had a few different things in our favor. The last is the markets are leading indicators, and so if they can look out 1 year from now and we're a lot closer to normal, then we're going to have a much better market, and that's what it's done so far. So we've seen some kind of green shoots in the economy. The unemployment rate has dropped back down to 10%. It hit 15% in April. Retail sales are actually at all-time highs again, believe it or not. People are still buying goods. They just went from, if I can't spend it at a restaurant, I'm going to buy sporting goods. We were talking about this morning, nobody can find a bike right now. Manufacturers completely sold out of bikes.
Martha has one right there behind her.
Yes. She should put that on Facebook Marketplace right now. So we've just shifted our spending habits, but we're still spending. And the last thing is the job market. I mentioned the unemployment rate, but it's improving. We've had unemployment claims come back down. Another thing that I can touch on later is continued stimulus. Those unemployment benefits are a little bit in doubt now. Those federal unemployment benefits, those are supposed to come back down. They technically ran out in July, but there's an executive order out there. So we probably still need a little bit of help on the economy side to fully get through this thing.
And I've got a few questions around that on my list as well, and like sustainability and things like that have come in. So everybody that's listening, go ahead and get your questions ready. You can put it in Q&A, you can put it in chat, and we'll come back to those in just a second. So Martha, you've got, the environment's changed. We now have a couple things that we're dealing with. We have the economy, which is called caused furloughs and layoffs, and people coming back. Now they're coming back to an office that's, there's still a pandemic going on. There's all this craziness that's happening. And there's old laws and new laws, or old ways of doing things and new ways of doing things. So catch us up from a legal perspective around, what was and what is over the last 150 days.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. So I think I've spent the last couple of months really helping clients work through issues related to one of three buckets. And the first one is clients who are trying to get their employees to come back to work. So, everybody took it to the house 5 months ago and fled. And then, people started getting comfortable. People were like, oh, I love not having a commute and being able to pet my dog during the day and all that stuff. And so now the employers are like, okay, you can come back now, and nobody's coming back. And so employers are really struggling with, how do we get these people to come back? And it's not as easy as just saying, all right, everybody be back in the office Monday, because you may have some folks who have underlying health conditions that might entitle them to an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You may have pregnant women whose doctors are saying, don't have them come back to the workplace. So there's all sorts of issues that employers are struggling with, and it's just not as black and white as we would like it to be. The second thing is businesses who have folks who are either become ill or are exposed to somebody who's ill, and what do they do? How long do they keep them out of the workplace? So that's always been a real a challenge for employers to know what those timelines are to keep those people out. And then finally, you mentioned the new law, which is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA. It was passed on April 1st. And it provides a period of paid leave for a variety of circumstances having to do with COVID-19 for employers with fewer than 500 employees. And so we've been helping clients work through these employee leave issues. And when Dr. Cordovez said, everything's changing, I started laughing, because that's been one of the most frustrating things for my clients is, there's very little guidance out there to rely on to begin with, and that the guidance that's out there keeps changing. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So I mentioned, how long does an employee need to be out of work before they can return if they get sick? And that has changed over time. The CDC has changed its guidance from they need to be out the 7 days from onset of symptoms, or 3 days from symptom resolution, whatever's the longest. And then they changed it to 10 days and 3 days from symptom resolution. And the current iteration is the later of 10 days from symptom onset, or 24 hours from symptom resolution. So these checklists that I have prepared for employers over time to help them try to figure out the timelines are just constantly changing as the CDC is changing, based on its research. The other thing is employers try to figure out their obligations under the FFCRA. So this is the law that provides paid leave for employees who are unable to either work or telework in 6 different situations. And this is one of these acts that's really deceptively simple. So a lot of employers read it and they're like, oh yeah, I totally get this. And then there are, in fact, a lot of nuances that can trip up, a well-meaning employer. The Department of Labor very helpfully issued regulations in the wake of the FFCRA. And in addition to those regulations, they issued a series of question and answer, which are supposed to be sort of the most common questions that might arise and that might vex an employer, and sort of supposed to help the employer, have a guide to go to. And that's great, except 2 weeks ago, a federal district court in New York struck the Department of Labor regulations, or at least some of them, saying that the Department of Labor has exceeded its authority in certain aspects of those regulations. And so employers are like, okay, now what do we do? And the answer is not as clear as you would think. So the New York federal court did not issue a nationwide injunction, as sometimes happens, but everybody's sort of in limbo right now. So our guidance at the moment is, keep on keeping on, basically, continue to follow the regulations, and we will wait and see what the Department of Labor does. It may be that it appeals, it may be that it issues different regulations, so we'll see. And then the other thing that has really vexed employers under the FFCRA is they feel like employees are abusing it. And, this is always the case. Employees find ways to manipulate laws or make them, work so they can take an extra long vacation or something. And so employers are like, hey, what can we do to make sure our employees don't abuse this law? And the answer is, there's not a whole lot you can do. So the significant benefit of the leave portion of the FFCRA, the sick leave portion, is that employees only get up to 80 hours of leave. And once they've exhausted that, they don't get it again, even if they become ill later on. So that's the case right now. Now, I will say this law expires on December 31st, and unless Congress renews it, that's it. But if Congress renews it, it may be that they give employees another 80 hours, for the next calendar year or something like that. So we've just got to be really, paying attention to what's going on with the FFCRA. And probably the most current hot issue I'm seeing with the FFCRA is school leave law. So one of the components is if your child's school or place of daycare is closed, you can get paid leave for up to 12 weeks, long time. And so we know schools are like all over the place right now. Some are closed but offering remote schooling, and some are partially open to people who opt in, or some people can be remote. And the bottom line here is we kind of recommend you look at each situation individually. But if you have an employee who says, my child's school is offering hybrid, so it's offering school in person for those kids who opt to come, but I've opted to have schooling at home for my kids because we have somebody at home who is, particularly vulnerable. Believe it or not, that person would not be entitled to that paid leave under the FFCRA because it depends on the child's school being actually closed. And closed means like you go to the door and pull it and nothing happens. So that's been a real vexing issue of late. So we're, kind of helping employers work through all these issues. And employers keep saying to me, hey, can you just prepare me a checklist that says everything I need to know about COVID-19 and what I need to do in every situation? And, I'm like, if only, I'd be like rich, right? If only I could do that. But there is no such thing. We are working through all these crazy circumstances every day. And, the best thing I can tell an employer to do is look at the DOL regulations and look at the Q&As. But if you're uncertain, call your legal counsel.
Yeah, for sure. I hadn't even heard about the school closing. I didn't even know about that piece of it. And usually I know about all this stuff because somebody's bringing it up to me. So thanks for sharing that. I do have some questions coming in, so I'm going to bounce into here pretty quickly. And since we ended on legal, I'm going to stay there because there's a legal question up here. It's actually one of mine as well. This person says, I work in litigation support, and after speaking with many of our clients, we are forecasting a tidal wave of litigation of all types coming here in the fall. Martha, is your firm anticipating this as well? And then my question was more around, business suits and making sure that we're, from a business perspective, is there anything that we need to be really cautious around with regard to any sort of a suit?
Right. So, I look at this a lot from the perspective of employers looking at suits from employees. And while there have been all sorts of predictions of explosions of litigation, I think, it's important that employers realize, you're really protected by the workers' compensation statute. So any employee who gets sick or injured at your place of employment, unless you intentionally harmed them, unless you intentionally got them sick, their lawsuit is going to be sort of preempted by the workers' compensation statute. So that means, you've got insurance for that. That means there's certain caps on the damages they can get. So it would be really difficult for an employee to try to circumvent that statute and bring a cause of action against you. I have seen a lawsuit filed in that vein. There's one in Illinois pending right now against a Walmart, where the employee alleged that the employer allowed folks to come to work sick, and it got this employee sick, and then she ended up passing away. Her estate or her family is bringing a lawsuit on her behalf. I don't know how successful that will be, but I think employers should generally rest easy knowing that they're generally protected by the work comp statutes. And then sort of from the overall perspective, I think one thing employers or companies should do is follow this CDC guidance as best they can in terms of mask wearing and social distancing in the workplace, and all the other things that you've been told to do by the CDC and state and local public health authorities. And I think generally, if you follow that guidance, which is not law. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, what's the CDC law say? Well, it's not law, it's guidance. But if you follow that guidance, you should be able to deflect a lawsuit that you did something wrong to get somebody sick, because you say, look, here are the 10 things the CDC was recommending. This is what I did. And I think that gives you your best opportunity to defend against a lawsuit.
Yeah, and not too indifferent, and just make sure you clean up the spill off the floor as soon as it happens so nobody slips on it, right? It's like,
right. That too, yeah.
And you have to do it on a repetitive basis. I know in my own office, it's something that we have to, we talk about it a lot. We review the checklist more than one time. If we see somebody who's not adhering to something, we have to go talk to them about it. So you do have to, this is new stuff for everyone. So, back to the basics, make sure you're doing those things and protecting yourself. And the information about workers' comp, that was really cool. Let me take it.
Andy, I'm sorry, can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
That probably is 25% of my day is a question from an employer. Can this employee come back to work? And so the onus becomes the doctor saying, how long has it been? How infectious could you be? So we are more and more every day taking on the onus of employers. I don't know if that makes any difference on your end, but it's coming a lot to me.
So that's the first question that somebody sent me. How long should we wait to have an employee come back to the office if they've had COVID?
So here's what we know today. If they tested positive, then 10 days from the positive test or 24 hours after resolution of symptoms. We do not retest because there's a high possibility that the person is still shedding uninfectious virus up to 100 days after an infection. So the person we consider not to be infectious after they've been symptom-free for either 24 hours or 10 days from their positive COVID test. If a person has been in close contact with a COVID confirmed case, and close contact means within 6 feet, and not just neighbors, brother, sister, it is close contact for a couple of minutes, like an interview or some kind of something that would increase the possibility of you breathing in respiratory droplets, that person has to quarantine from the moment of exposure until 14 days have passed and the person has remained asymptomatic. So if the exposure happens and no symptoms, 14 days. If the exposure happens and they become symptomatic 5 days in, then you start counting 10 days from there.
That's a lot of math you have to keep up with.
Listen, I think we're good.
Luckily, we have Teresa and Tim here are the math wizards. So I'm going to toss a question up to you guys, and you can pick who's going to answer this. Teresa's unmuted, so
I'm ready.
all right. Let's see. Let me go to how long do you think till we see a recovery around, very specifically, business travel?
Oh my goodness. That may be everybody tossing in. I mean, business travel typically lags leisure travel, right? So we've seen leisure travel pick up. I think, and this specifically, there's so much that we've learned, trial by fire that we can do digitally, that we may have an even more extended lag in business travel for the reasons we just discussed. There are employers who are really sensitive to liability. And if there's an alternative out there that doesn't require travel, they may be more incentivized. So I wish I could pick a date, but that is completely tethered to the 30,000 other things that we're all wondering. Tim, do you have any insight there?
I think it's at least 3 year in, just from the people that I deal with and the clients that we serve. Some of it's also not only the liability aspect, but probably the margin aspect as well, where because revenues are down, businesses are looking anywhere they can to try to protect profitability. And if that means keeping somebody out of hotels, off the road, per diem, then they're going to do it, and they already have. So some of that is just pure margin control as well.
Yeah, personally,
I will say though, just for the sales roles, I mean, it's a lot of where business owners too are dealing with, the more remote things become, sometimes you lose that culture and that ability to move forward. So as companies' sales begin to drop, that may incentivize the travel to come back. So that'll be one piece of it as well.
Yeah, if the market drives it, the market will get it. It's just going to take the market driving it for that to happen eventually. Let me come back over to Martha. Are we allowed to tell our team if someone in our office actually has COVID-19?
So you're allowed to tell your team that someone in your office has COVID-19. You should not tell your team the name of the person. Now, most times they'll figure it out, right? So if you say somebody who works in the copy center who last worked on Friday has contracted COVID-19, and Frank isn't there that day, and Frank should be there that day, they're going to figure out it's Frank. But you're not supposed to tell them, because that violates, a lot of people think it violates HIPAA. It doesn't violate HIPAA, it violates the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you want to keep that person's identity confidential while providing your employees enough information to understand their personal risk. And as I explain it to employers, I say, look, I don't want somebody leaving your place of employ and going to visit their elderly mother that night and then figuring out a few days later that they were exposed to COVID-19 at work. So just think of it that way. So, hey, somebody who last worked last Friday has contracted COVID-19. We're telling anybody who was around that person for the 48 hours prior to their onset of symptoms that they should monitor their symptoms and potentially be tested if they're concerned about it.
Perfect. Good answer. Let me stay with you too, because I've got an interesting question here. And Miranda, she put into chat, and schools are closed, right? So it's like, we got all this shit going on and just all the schools are closed. With managing schooling children from home, from a legal standpoint, what is the responsibility of the employee versus the responsibility of the employer?
So in terms of, paying the employee or
So, we work with a bunch of different companies, and we're, a lot of the questions that we deal with are, how do I set my business up to best support these, individuals who have children at home and they're having to, tear away from work to, log them into class, or the class does, well, all the stuff that they're being distracted by. How much of the onus is on an employer to provide that and do that from a legal standpoint? And how much of it is on the parent or employee to figure all that out on their own, and, the employer to do nothing? What's the balance there from a legal standpoint?
Sure. So the only legal obligation employers have in this situation is to comply with the paid leave provisions of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. There's that provision I mentioned that provides up to 12 weeks of leave at 2/3 of pay for employees whose child's school is closed. Beyond that, you don't have any legal obligation. But here's the thing, you don't probably really want to lose all your great employees, and particularly your female employees, who tend to bear the sort of the onus of, this homeschooling situation. So, anything you can do to accommodate them in their need to help their kids with their remote schooling would be great. And that might mean you let them come in after hours. So if they normally work 8 to 5, maybe you arrange something where they work from 1 to 10 or something at night, or maybe they work on the weekends, or maybe you reduce their usual 40 hours to 25 so that they can do some after hours work and not get too far behind. Legally, you don't have a whole lot of obligation, but I think it behooves employers to see what they can do to help. Here's one more thing that I will mention that some employers are thinking about, and that is hiring somebody to come to work to sort of allow their employees to bring their school-age children to work. Everybody's sitting there with a laptop computer doing their remote school, wherever that is, and the employer has hired some sort of proctor or helper to kind of help the kids with these issues so your employees can work. I'm actually looking at that for an employer right now. The state of Tennessee has reduced the sort of the burden of opening what they call a daycare center for this kind of situation. So you do have to register, but it's not as onerous as normally opening up a daycare center is. There are limits on the number of kids and all that, but that may be something a particularly large employer might want to consider if that's within the budget. And that helps your employees to get to work, and they can focus on their work and not be worried about, oh my gosh, is my kid, logging into their science class on time.
Yeah, and that was something that came out in the discussion that people, we're obviously on calls from all over the world, but that was something that a few people were actually doing. So it's nice to know that that's being thoughtfully considered. Let me go back to health real quick. I'm going to drop the bomb question on you. Ready? Leah?
Might as well do it.
All right. So this is what somebody sent me. I've heard that a vaccine, there it comes, a vaccine will be out before the election. And I've also heard we won't have one until 2022 or 2023. So on this call right now, can you just tell us the truth about when the vaccine will be available, and like availability and difference in when it actually makes a difference, or two different things? So talk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So they've taken parts of the virus and they've made a vaccine from it. So that is well established. Moderna, even who, we've all gotten to that place where it is possible to make a vaccine. What we don't know is how well it works. And I'm sure everyone that can hear my voice right now has had a flu vaccine and has gotten sick from the flu at least once. So 2 years ago, the flu vaccine was only about 30% effective. What we don't know now is how effective these vaccines will be. So yes, they're out there, but most of them are in phase 3 trials, which means we're going to give them to thousands of people and see, do they get sick when we're exposed to the virus? That's what we don't know. So if you rush through this process, you're just not getting the numbers, the ends, to make a statistically significant conclusion, which is what's so scary about the Russian vaccine, is how were they able to really test it we need the time and the exposure. So if there is one before the election, and I'm going to do this just to you guys. I think I would wait until the one that's ready after closer to the end of the year that has been tested and maybe manipulated a little bit for either effectiveness or safety. You know, vaccines are for the most part very safe, and I don't mean to say anything bad about it. I get a flu vaccine every year, even though it's only 40% effective. But there are so many things we don't know about this vaccine that I wouldn't rush it. This is something that we need to get right. We don't need to get it right now. So if it's ready by the election, have some skepticism around it. I think I feel more comfortable about the one that came out at the end of the year, because it just gives more time to see what we need to.
So this is a broader question. The way we treat flu virus is today, right? So everybody kind of goes to Walgreens or CVS or whatever. They get their little shot, or they meet you on the weekend and you give it to them, whatever that looks like. And not everybody does it, but most people do. How long in your mind, it's just a personal question, how long in your mind before we're treating this virus the way we kind of think about flu season or flu vaccine?
I'm hopeful that by the time next fall rolls around, we've had enough experience with it that it becomes more of a flu. What we don't know right now is how long the immunogenicity, the effectiveness of the vaccine lasts. This has been just an unusual thing for all of us. It might be a twice-a-year vaccine, just because it doesn't seem to provide that much immune protection. So even if there is a vaccine, it might be a twice-a-year vaccine. The flu vaccine at its best is supposed to last a year, but at its best, 6 or 9 months. So this year, did that answer your question? Am I being as vague as I'm intending to be?
Yeah, you would think you wouldn't think you were a doctor. You were
Oh, this is the toughest thing to know is we're all really hanging on the vaccine. When it first came out, we were all hanging on the antibodies. And there was such variability in the antibody results that hasn't been.
So do we have global access to a vaccine that works in the next year?
Yes.
Okay, global access to a vaccine that works in the next year. So
Yes.
So that vaccine we're using it, and everybody has access to it in the next 12 months.
I believe so. What we don't know is how effective that vaccine will be. However, even if it is 40% effective, it'll still drop that 2%.
Yeah.
Die down to a more manageable level, like the flu is now.
And then a question came in: would everybody be required to get the vaccine?
I can't see that. I can't see that in the United States of America. I can't see that. After all, it is your choice and your body, and I can't ever see that happening.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Let's go to economy. So this is more of a individual question that they sent these in. So how would you suggest someone who thinks they may be at risk of losing their job due to layoffs prepare from that from a financial perspective? And then there's a bit of a secondary question, different question, but it kind of coincides. Personal investments. Where should I be focusing my investments right now? So whether that be, hey, this is somebody who might be losing their position, or they're kind of fearful of that. What should they be doing with their money? Or I'm going to not lose my job, but what should I be doing with my money?
All right, so this is much like Leah, I'm going to be a little bit vague and say it depends. But generally speaking, I think if you anticipate that you might be losing your primary stream of income, then cash has been something for the last 150 days that we've talked about nonstop, knowing all of the ways that you have access to it, the restrictions around it. One of the things that I did want to make sure came up on this call, 401k plans for the business owners and the employees who are fearful they may lose their income source. You do have access if you've been affected by COVID-19 and it's reduced your income to withdraw up to $100,000 of your 401k and decide to pay it back over 3 years or spread the tax out over 3 years. So I think it's dependent upon the situation. There have been some provisions that have come out because of this that have allowed special access. But if nothing else, stockpiling all of the cash you can, reducing your expenses, and coming up with a worst case scenario plan for access to liquidity. As far as liquidity that you have and where that should be positioned, I'm going to punt that over to Tim since his head is in our portfolio every day.
Yeah, so the portfolio for if you're worried about losing your job, definitely raise cash to get you through at least 6 months, almost a bucket type strategy. So cash to get you through at least 6 months, and pure cash. Don't get too cute with it and do ultra short bonds or things like that. Raise pure cash, cash equivalents, money market funds, things like that. And then probably introduce a little bit more bonds in the portfolio as well in case it lasts longer than 6 months. Now, if you feel pretty good about where you are and you're just asking about portfolio position from here on out after we've gotten this snapback, well, you've got to trust in a little bit of mean reversion here, where those technology, healthcare, consumer staples that I mentioned earlier, it can't quite call it here because we're not through it yet, but eventually those cyclical names are going to come back. So you want to start gradually introducing more small caps, more industrials, more financials, things like that should come around and perform much better going forward, just purely from a recovery standpoint and from a valuation standpoint. Over long periods of time, the market is a weighing machine. And you may not see it over the next 6 months because we're still kind of fighting through this thing, but long term, price matters. People kind of forget that occasionally, but the price you're paying for these stocks does matter. The other piece of it, I've been focused on U.S. because that's the bulk of our portfolio and where we kind of focus our day to day on. But internationals, at some point, you've got to look at all right, who has weathered the virus the best and who is already on the stage to recovery. And we've seen some of that in Southeast Asia already. And what does our dollar look like? And after you print a bunch of money, which we've gone from a balance sheet standpoint from $4 trillion to over $7 trillion, that generally means a weaker dollar. Weaker dollar is helpful for international stocks. And we've already seen that over the last month. That cycle may continue. We were already kind of at a peak anyway. And so international cyclicals, finally a globally diversified portfolio should help you going forward.
Awesome. We are recording this, so we got all of that down.
Yeah. One more thing I should add on that is quality. You kind of, there's been this thing that, oh, debt's cheap. Let's take out as much as we can and leverage this thing up and grow it. That's coming back around a little bit where we need to look at profitability, leverage ratios, things like that, focus on good quality companies, both on the stock and the bond side.
And that's true in general business terms as well, right? So that last statement kind of goes to my next question. I'm going to keep it where it is for a second. This person says, I'm itching to go on offense and put some of the liquidity to work in expansion, but we want to be careful not to use the funds and find out that there was a second or third wave that we might need these funds. So it translates from personal experience of, hey, if I got 3 to 6 months of cash, can I then go put something in the market as what you're talking about, Tim? From a business perspective, what are the 1, 2, or 3 triggers that somebody needs to be looking for before they may run out and just kind of spend to scale? Teresa, you were jumping in.
Well, I know. Well, one thing I'm hearing, because it's a question that's coming in quite a bit, is because PPP may be idle, there's some liquidity on hand. So I hear a lot of entrepreneurs say, hey, I have liquidity. How can I play offense with it? I really caution everybody to understand the provisions of those EIDL funds. And so understanding what you can and cannot do before that loan is repaid may actually cause you, if you really think about not being able to possibly increase your income may cause you to decide to pay it back sooner than you thought you might. So I think my first question would be, it depends on where the liquidity came from.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for that, but are there any things to look for? Is it specific to this business? You got to look, just take general market trends, or is there anything that you guys have in your, bag of tricks down there that we can't see right now?
Well, I think it goes back to price. You've got to look at multiples for what you're paying for a new business. And things have gotten pretty lofty a year or 2 years back. And we were seeing multiples that we hadn't seen in the previous maybe 10 years being paid for private businesses. And we had a couple of clients that were looking at pretty big sales going into this. Those deals completely fell apart. Now there's some other buyers kind of circling out there. So that question's, they're not the only person thinking that. And so you've just got to look at multiples, make sure that your existing business or your existing line is doing well. And that gives you some ammunition to acquire market share, go into different lines. Unfortunate for them, but hopefully you can get things at a little bit distressed prices right now. And so it's not a bad idea. Just make sure that your main operating line is doing well, cash flow positive. We're not through it yet, so just don't lever this thing up too much. But if you've got cash on hand and it's a decent price, I think it's fine to play some offense.
I like offense. I don't like defense very much. So I'm gonna let me go health just a second. I'm gonna combine these questions. So the first one is there any truth to long-term effects of COVID, like heart disease or heart damage and things like that? That's the first thing. And is there anything else somebody needs to be aware of? The second is, what's one thing that everybody can do every day to protect themselves from COVID? And you mentioned the immune system boost. So we got about 5 minutes left. So take a couple of minutes and fill in the gaps there.
So there are long-term effects, and can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, is it clear? Okay, so there are long-term effects from this that we are still finding every day. So in perfectly healthy collegiate athletes, we're seeing about 12 weeks of fatigue, shortness of breath, and we think there might be some underlying lung damage. So this is a very thrombocytic, which means it causes microscopic blood clots. The blood is clotting and unclotting, and we think that's causing some damage to the lungs. So in the long run, we do believe there will be some heart and lung issues, absolutely. And then all of the issues, if you do make it through ICU, just the medicine. So people that are very, very sick, we're seeing a lot of sequelae happen. And I did bring a little something for you guys, because every day what we are reinforcing, even though the treatments in the back question, is that it is much more beneficial to have a good immune system. So if you get less than 5 hours of sleep every night for a week, you have 4.5 times more likelihood of getting the flu. So sleep well, rest well, eat well. And I emailed a list of the things that we've put together that we know will either inhibit viral replication or potentiate your immune system. So vitamin C, vitamin D, Pepsid, famotidine is a potent antiviral as well as an antihistamine. Zinc, which we believe is the reason why hydroxychloroquine was thought to be beneficial in the first place, because it was hydroxychloroquine and zinc. Melatonin is also a very potent anti-inflammatory, and it has some antiviral properties. Ivermectin, which is an antiparasitic, if you do get sick, that's one of the things that we know can also inhibit function. So Andy, I've sent Leah a little list that we could probably send out of the things that we know that will not harm, primum non nocere, will not harm and may be beneficial for COVID. Of my patients that have been COVID positive, we jump on this exact protocol, and I have not seen one that's been hospitalized. So I'm not saying anything other than we've had wonderful luck just really hunkering down in terms of making your body strong enough to fight this. And I believe that will reduce the risk of long-term sequelae and complications.
That's beautiful. And everybody that registered will get a recap. So we do have someone taking notes on everything that we're talking about. So any materials you guys want to send like this, we'll put it into the recap. They'll get that in email. So thanks for sharing that. And that's stuff that we can proactively go do on a regular basis as well. So at the end of the day, keep your immune system high. Just because it's 60, 70% of the people who may get this may not, be tremendously adversely affected by it early. We don't know what the long-term effects are. So it's better to stay healthy and not get this than it is to go, oh, just give it to me so I can get it over with. I do hear people saying that, which is ridiculous to me.
Exactly. And the big rush now is to find out what other medicines are out there that would inhibit the virus from replicating, right? So who would have thought melatonin or ivermectin? So I do believe that that's our best defense.
All right, so we got exactly 5 minutes left. He says, was that Pepsid that you said? What was the?
Yes, Pepsid.
Yeah. Okay,
Pepsid, famotidine, 20 milligrams twice a day.
And this will be in the.
Yeah, it will be. Mm-hmm.
All right, perfect. So JP, we'll get that to you. Hey, a friend of mine sent over a question. And I want to start with you, Martha, and then I'm going to go to Teresa and Leah. I'll end with you. Tim, let's let these guys address this, because I'd love to hear from them the answer to this, because I think it's really important. And I adore this person that sent this in, so I want to make sure we get a little bit of time on this. And this is a personal perspective question, professional women, personal perspective question. What does the long-term impact you foresee for women in the workplace? I'm seeing more and more cases of professional women stepping away from the workforce after juggling just got to be too much, myself included. What could this look like in 5 to 10 years for our workforce?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's a depressing question, frankly. I've certainly seen in my own firm and in the clients I'm dealing with, it's really women with small children, particularly, that are finally just throwing in the towel. Like, I can't do homeschooling, I can't manage all of this and try to productively work from home. I'm either not meeting my production goals, or I feel like I'm letting my team down. So I'm either going to step away, or the company's going to ask me to leave. And that's a terrible position to be in. And in 5 or 10 years, what we see probably is a workplace that looks like it looked 20, 25 years ago, where there's far fewer women, and particularly women with children, sort of feeling like, hey, I see people in front of me who've done this, who've done it successfully. I've seen other women. And so I'm going to move, this is a career path that I can take. So, and that's why I kind of made the distinction I did when we were talking about what is an employer's obligation with regard to women with children, or employees with children. It just, for whatever reason, this burden tends to fall more heavily on women. But I think that's why, even if an employer doesn't have a legal duty, whatever you can do to try to keep your female employees in the workforce and give them a path of reentry when this is over and they're able to come back, would be, the right thing to do. And I think, we all see the benefit of diversity on our teams. And so hopefully there's a drive by employers to say, we lost some women during this process. What can we do later on to remedy this? What can we do better as an employer, or what can we do to get those women back into the workplace?
It's a good perspective. Thank you. And Teresa, you've got this at your house.
Actually, my little one ran down with a math question. I don't know if anybody figured out, but I guess I'm more inspired by it. I think I was actually reading a study the other day by McKinsey Consulting Group that the wealth that women manage, which is now 10 billion, will become 30 billion over the next decade. And it's not just because of their efforts in the workforce, it's inheritances as well. As their parents age and move on and the wealth transfers. So I'm inspired by the fact that women from sandwich generation, kids, parents, you know, this was a moment where we had to handle kids and parents who might be in a nursing home situation. So we've never been pushed, I think, farther. We now will have more resources than ever. So my hope is that employers understand the different skill set in many areas of employment that women bring to the table. Financial services is one of them. Women approach money in a very different way than men. That this situation will push us to think in a different way of how we approach family plus work, especially small business owners where it's the family business. So I'm inspired by what's happened. I think when people are stressed, but they see value, they tend to create something new and innovative. So it's my hope that we do that. And I really think we will. Go, yeah, women.
I agree. And I hate to make this a women thing, but I feel like we have worked so long and so hard to be the badasses that we are. You will not. I will learn to deliver my job more nimbly. I will invent ways to deliver care. I think what you'll see is a lot of different ways for us to work, be birthed. And this is a time when companies should have strong women employees, because either we find a way to work with you or we'll find a way to work around you. But we've come this far and we will also solve this problem. Martha, I just don't think anybody can put us back. We've all worked so hard to get here. I think we'll figure out a different way of delivering what we were put here to do.
And it's up to all us to make sure that that's the case, right? I mean, there's a possibility it goes one way or the other, or something in the middle. And we get a choice every day to do what we need to do to make sure that those things don't happen. So, Tim, you didn't get any words in on that particular round, but I'll give you 1 minute. Anything you want to close with?
No, I will add just one thing to that. They're not the only person feeling that way. In fact, the Minneapolis Fed has a paper out on how this is impacting working women with kids. You know, sometimes it takes data to smack me in the face before I realize the issue. And no, I feel for them out there. And my wife being one of them with one school age and two other in diapers. So.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. Last 150 days have been kind of crazy. We learned a lot. We made some mistakes. We tested some stuff. We learned some more, and we'll keep moving forward. I appreciate you guys all being friends of mine and supporting me in my life and what we do here at Petra. And then today, sharing knowledge with everybody that was on the call. We'll get the recap out with all the comments. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of today's webinar. And if I can do anything for the 5 of you, please let me know anytime. Cool?
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.